Hey friend, Alex here, and welcome back to Audio Edges. If you're getting into Melodyne and tuning vocals and you just opened up the plugin for the first time and are wondering, well, what the heck do I do now? You're in the right place. In just a few minutes from now, you will know exactly how to use Melodyne to tune vocals. You will understand the tools and what they do, exactly how to use them to tune vocals, and some of my best Melodyne tips that are going to save you years of tuning by hand headaches if you don't know them. So let's hop into the DAW and make Melodyne easy for you. Okay, so we just hopped into the DAW. This is Pro Tools that we're looking at now, but as we always say, the DAW really doesn't matter in this case. So in this case, we'll be using Pro Tools. And what you'll want to do first is open up the Melodyne plugin at the very top of your vocal chain before any other processing. Melodyne records the audio into the plugin. So if it's after other plugins in your chain, going back to those plugins before Melodyne won't actually do anything because Melodyne is referencing the original audio transfer into the plugin. So we have to transfer this audio into Melodyne. Now, in recent times, a lot of DAWs have implemented something called ARA, which is audio random access. And what this does is it allows a DAW to exchange information with Melodyne in real time. But just for the sake of traditionally using Melodyne and getting you started, I'm going to make sure to show you the original way to transfer audio into Melodyne in case your DAW doesn't yet have ARA. So there's a couple ways to do this, and here's how we're going to get it started. As you see, Melodyne is at the top of my vocal chain. Just underneath it, I just have a simple EQ because this vocal is completely raw, and I just thought it would be more pleasant to listen to with a little bit of a high pass. So that's all that is there, but keep in mind we have Melodyne right at the top, and we're gonna activate this plugin and open it up. And as you'll see, when you first open it up, the plugin is empty. There's no audio inside, no information yet. So what we need to do is hit this transfer button and we need to play this audio. And when we play it, it'll record with the transfer into Melodyne. So you'll see this happen now. I'll just play a little clip so you can get the idea.
How I wish that you were here.
And then when you stop the recording, the audio goes into the plugin like this. However, there's a much faster way to do this. So I'm going to delete this here, and we're going to hit the transfer button and just freeze up until the Melodyne plugin. So I right click, freeze up to this insert, and we'll see the audio transfer very quickly and be detected into the plugin. Now, obviously it's frozen, so we need to click this little snowflake here, unfreeze the track. And as you can see, here is our audio. Now, sometimes when you do this, it will detect in a different format. So we just have to go up to algorithm and click melodic standard, and that will separate our pitches into what you are seeing here. So here's what you need to know. We have our vocal in the plugin, and what you need to know is that this is a visual representation of the vocal. This little red line, do you see this little red line here? Just like this, that is the pitch of the note. And this big yellow blob around it, and the size of this yellow blob is the volume of the note. So the larger, the taller the blob, the louder the volume it was. And just seeing the blobs all kind of in their different forms is showing you where the notes are changing. And obviously, if the note is higher up, we can see that the red line of the pitch is moving with the blob, and there's a corresponding note value with it on the side. So you can actually visually see if a note is a little bit sharp if it's not centered. So we can see here how the pitch of this note is a little bit leaning towards the top of this D sharp note. So it's a little bit sharp. That's what you need to understand about this visual representation. Okay, probably the next thing you're wondering is how am I scrolling around and zooming in? Let's talk about that next. I want to talk about navigating in this plugin. Okay, so the first thing that you can know is there's different ways to navigate, but I want to show you my favorite ways, and they're definitely the fastest from my experience. So first off is scrolling up and down using a mouse or a trackball is going to be most handy with the Melodyne plugin. Trying to do this on a trackpad might be difficult. It's not impossible, but it could cause more headaches. So if you have a mouse or a trackball, this will be best. And first off is just scrolling up and down. That's going to help you move up and down in the plugin is scrolling. Now, if you want to move left to right navigation, you can hold shift on your keyboard and scroll, and then you'll be moving left to right while holding shift. Now, you can also do that with these here, but I find it much quicker just to use the scrolling method. Next thing you need to know is how to zoom in, okay? And you can see these are some of our tools up here that we're going to talk about. And when you click, you click and hold, it'll allow you to select different tools. And you hover over the tool and let go. So this is our zoom tool, but I'm going to show you a faster way to get to your zoom tool, and that is to hold Option Command. And while you're holding down Option Command, our zoom tool will appear, and you can zoom in like so, just by clicking and dragging. That's a much faster way to use the zoom tool because you can access it at any moment. I can scroll around, I can zoom in, I can zoom out, and that's just by holding Option Command versus going to our toolbar every time to select the zoom tool. Now, you'll see this window at the top with all the different tools we talked about, but there's a faster way to get to that too, and that's by holding Control. And when you hold Control and click, make sure you're holding Control down. You can click and then hover over the different tools, and once you let go, you've switched to that tool. So for example, the pitch tool, right? Now we're on the pitch tool. So I'm going to hold Control, click, and I can select different tools. The Formant Tool, Control, click, and I can hover over and select the Amplitude Tool. So that's a much faster way of getting to these tools. And trust me, you're really going to like doing it this way versus going up to this top menu every single time. Okay, so that's how we switch tools. Let's go through the tools one by one and get you vibing with Melodyne. Our first tool here is called the main tool, and we can use this just to click on notes, and we can use it to select multiple notes at a time, and that's our main tool or our pointer tool. The one below it is a scroll tool, which allows you to scroll back and forth, but like I said, it's quicker just to stay on whatever tool you are and use your scrolling functions on your mouse and keyboard instead. We already know our zoom tool by holding Option Command is the most efficient way to get to that one. Let's move to our pitch tool. Here is our pitch tool, and this is what our pitch tool does. If you hold down Option, you can click on a note and move it up and down and pitch. So let's hold Option and click and drag a note up and down and see what it does. So that was a bit of a drastic example, but we can move the note up and down and help get our pitch right. Now, here's a quick trick. When we're on our pitch tool, you can actually go over a note and double click it, and it will snap it to the grid into the place where it's closest to the center of the note. So let's try that here. Did you see how it snapped into place? Let's try it again. Let's pretend the note's a little bit flat, and I double click, snaps it into place. Now, if the note is really low and I double click it, it snaps onto whichever note is nearest. Right? Did you see that? So we just have to make sure when we double click that things aren't snapping to the wrong notes. And here's a little trick. If the pitch is pretty good, but you just want to tighten it up, we can go to our main tool, select a group all at once, go to our pitch tool and double click. And did you see how it all snapped into place? So that is how we use the pitch tool. You can either hold Option and manually move the notes while holding Option, or double click a note to tighten it to the grid. That's our pitch tool. Now within our pitch tool, we have some pitch subtools. The first is pitch modulation tool. Let's take a look at what this does. So we hovered over it, let go, and now our tool has switched. Pitch modulation controls the vibrato of a note and basically flattens out the pitch. So if you overdo this, you're going to get kind of an auto-tune sound. So I'm going to click and drag, and that's how we're going to use this pitch modulation tool. And you can use this to subtly tighten up the notes where the vibrato might be a little too much, or we just want to smoothen out the pitch of a note. So first, I'm going to snap this to the grid. Okay. Now it's pretty in tune here, but we're going to use the pitch modulation tool to tighten it up even more. And that's just clicking and dragging down. Now, this might be a little too much and sound unnatural, so you need to be careful with this tool and only use it when you really need it. One other thing I should mention that I don't know if I've said yet is that to play audio, you need to double click in front of the note or double click from wherever you want to listen to. And it doesn't matter which tool you're on when you do that. If you double click, you'll be able to hear. So check this out. I'm going to double click.
Everything I want.
You hear that? Let me double click up here.
How I wish that you were
Okay, so I
here.
just double click and I can listen. So let's use double click to listen to what I just did.
Everything I
Did you
want.
hear how I flatlined the pitch a bit too much with the modulation tool? So what I'm going to do is highlight the note, and I can actually go over my pitch tool and go to the top here, restore original, and I'm going to restore the pitch modulation to its original form because that sounded more natural. Now, one other tool you need to know here is the pitch drift tool. And I actually find myself using the pitch drift tool more than the pitch modulation tool or any other tools. And what the pitch drift tool does is when a note is falling flat like this, let's use this note as an example. I'm going to start by moving it onto the grid here.
Yeah.
Okay. The pitch drift tool will help a note that's falling flat flatten itself out. So see how this note, the pitch falls flat over the duration of the note? Let's just click and drag on the note and check this out. See how it leveled out? So here's what it sounded like before.
Give me everything.
Now we can flatten it out.
Give me everything.
Now it's a subtle difference this time, but there are going to be times when this pitch drift tool absolutely saves you. Okay, so those are our pitch tools. Let's move on to the Formant tool. The Formant tool is not often really needed so much, but there are times when you will need to use it, and I'm going to explain that right now. Basically, with the Formant tool, let's go to our Formant tool. This is going to be used when you need to tune a note a little bit farther from where it naturally sits. And if that happens, and when I say naturally sits, I mean where it naturally sits in that performance. Sometimes if you grab a note that was sung a bit lower and tune it to a higher note where maybe it was intended to be, it can sound a little bit fake and sound a little bit artifacty, if that makes sense. So let's use an example where we need to tune a note a little bit higher, and we can use the Formant tool to fix that.
How I wish that you were here to give me everything I want. But I know that life's unfair and we can't always have it all.
Okay, so let's take this note, for example.
I want, I
This
want,
want. I'm going to tune this note up here.
I
Let's
want
pretend the melody is supposed to be on this F here, okay?
everything I want.
Now, did you hear how it sounded kind of fake?
Everything I want.
I can make that a little more natural by regulating the formant with our Formant tool. And all I need to do is click, and I heard the formant of the note go up a little too high, so I'm going to bring this down and try and find a more natural place. You have to do this by ear and see where it sounds most natural.
I want everything I want.
See how that's already a little more natural than this?
Everything I want. I want everything I want.
Now, it's a little bit less noticeable now. You can get really drastic with this Formant tool,
I want it, I want.
but that's now sounding also artificial. So if you need to tune a note a little bit out of where it naturally sits, you can use that Formant tool to just help it, just smooth out the way and make sure that the formant stays consistent with the singer's voice. Now let's continue moving on. Our next tool is the Amplitude Tool. And what you can do with the Amplitude Tool is really just volume stuff. So it's really simple. Let's say this note came in a little too hot on the singer's mic. That note is a little bit too loud. All you do is you switch to your Amplitude Tool and you click and you drag up and down to change the volume. So the bigger the blob, the louder we're getting. So let's make this note that looks just a little bit big and loud. Let's tuck it in a little bit. And you can see the volume difference in dB up here as you do that.
How I wish that you were
Okay,
here.
let's pretend this note was sung a little bit too loud.
You
I'm
were
going to use my
here.
Amplitude tool to pull it in.
That you
Once
were
again, I'm just
here.
clicking and holding down my click and dragging up and down to make that difference. So that's the Amplitude tool. Don't get too worried yet about the Fade tool and things like that. Start with the Amplitude tool and you can go from there. If your vocal is edited well in your track here, you don't have to get too involved with the Melodyne editing. Sometimes if you missed a bit of clip gaining, you can take care of it in Melodyne after, and that's where I find that the Amplitude tool is the most handy. Our next tool is the Time tool. Time tool is really, really easy. If you just want to tighten up some of the timing of the notes, now make sure your BPM, your tempo in your DAW is the correct tempo for your song, because then Melodyne will be able to snap to this grid correctly. You can see Melodyne detects the tempo up here as well, and that will just make it easier for you visually when you're timing vocals, because you can line things up with the grid lines here. But just for the sake of demonstration, let's just grab the beginning of a note and move around the timing so you can see what this does. So what we're going to do is switch to our Time tool, which we were on, and you have to hold down Option. And as you hold down Option, you can click and drag the start of the note around. Do you see that? And then double click to listen to what you did.
Everything I
Okay.
want. Everything I want.
Okay, so this as you can see is changing the duration of the notes. Obviously, if you do it too much, as I did in this kind of crazy example here, you're going to get artifacting. So this is better just for tightening things up than doing like drastic, like sustaining a note or something like that. So that's the timing tool, and you can use that just to go in and just tighten things up timing wise and make sure you're listening as you're doing it. Okay. The last tool here is the note separation tool. And this note separation tool is really going to come in handy. And all that does is oftentimes in the detection, Melodyne, when it's detecting the audio coming in, it may not separate all of the pitch blobs automatically. In some cases, it'll have a little bit of trouble detecting it if it's something quick, and you may need to separate that yourself. So we're going to go to our note separation tool and double click where we see this happening, and then it'll separate it for us, and the pitch blob will fall into place. And now we can edit this part of the note separately. Okay.
Give me
So it'll be pretty obvious too where you see this happening. Let's see some examples here. Here's a spot. We see the beginning of this note, right? Swooping up like that. We're going to want to separate the note here, and then we can edit that separately. Okay, now that we covered the note separation tool, let's talk a little bit about a few bonus tips for you getting started. Okay, so the first one I'm going to start with, just because we're here with this note separation example, is I don't recommend tuning breaths. Breaths look like this in Melodyne. It doesn't have a red pitch line, and it's just kind of a little blob like that. So you start after using the plugin Melodyne a little bit, you get used to seeing what breaths look like, and you can see them pretty easily. So we'll see that this is a breath here. Okay, and so what's going to happen is a lot of the times breaths will be attached to other notes, so you'll just need to separate them before you work on the notes that they're attached to. So as you can see in this example, I'm going to separate the breath. I'm going to separate this note, and just having this note separated allows me to edit this note and not be dragging around the breath with it. The reason I don't recommend tuning breaths is because often if you tune breaths, they get a little bit swirly sounding and very artifacty. So if it's a minute tune like this, that's probably not a big deal. But once you really get into the thick of things, you're not going to be wanting to tune breaths. Okay, so that's one tip. Another quick bonus tip, the last thing I'm going to say here, is that once you switch to your pitch tool, you're going to see these little yellow lines between notes. And those are kind of like transition controls between notes, and that will smooth out the transition. So all you need to do is, let's say we want to smooth out the transition here between this note we just separated. You just zoom in as much as you need to and hover over that little yellow line. And once you do that, at a certain point, you're going to see the tool switch. Did you see that? Let's do it one more time, okay? I'm on my pitch tool, and then the tool switches. And all I need to do is click and drag up and down, and I can edit how quickly that transition happens. Okay? See how the pitch transition is a little different? So you can click and listen.
But I know.
And you can even do this between notes. If the pitch gets a little crazy, okay, you can go like this and then go to your transition tool and smooth it out a little bit. All right, see how the pitch just fell into place a little more there? So don't overdo it with the transitions, but listen, and that's a handy tool to use as well, especially if you're doing some editing like this with like a step down here, and you want to just make sure that the flow between those notes and those vocal runs is really smooth. You can edit these transitions here like that. Okay? So that is one last tip. And speaking of transitions, probably I should mention under the time tool that you also have an attack speed tool. And all this does is at the beginning of the note here, there's an attack speed, and that will allow you just to determine how quickly that note comes in when we reach that note in the timeline. Most of the time, you're not going to be needing to use this, but if you really need to get into the details, you can finesse things with this attack tool as well. All right, so that should cover everything in Melodyne. To give you a quick example, I'm going to just reverse all of the pitch here, the pitch work we did, and I'm going to show you really quick what it would look like if I were tuning maybe the first line of this vocal.
How I wish. How.
Okay. Highlight and click a couple times. I'm going to snap this. I'm going to listen.
That you
I'm going to
were
pitch drift this just to make it a little more consistent. And I'm also going to pitch drift this. That note falls a little, so I'm going to do that.
You were here to
I'm
give
going to separate that breath.
give me
This pitch drift here, I'm going to smooth that out so it's not falling flat.
me everything.
See how that note was a little bit off? There we go.
Me everything
Okay, so that was
want.
that Formant example we did below. So I'm going to restore the pitch center.
And I want, but I know that.
Okay, here we go. And
But I know that life's
all right,
unfair.
so you can see here that basically you can basically see the idea of how to do this. I'm not going to tune the whole vocal and make you sit around all day, but that is how to use Melodyne, and I hope that this helped you. Well, there you have it, my friend. Hopefully Melodyne doesn't seem so crazy anymore. It's actually really easy to use once you get the hang of the tools and the tricks that I showed you in this video, and I know that you can do it. If you enjoyed this video, I have a completely free resource that I think you will love even more. It's called our Ultimate Mixing Tips and Hacks Guide, and it is a juicy list of some of my best mixing tips that will help you start getting results in your music mixing immediately. I know you're gonna love it, and it's currently completely free, so go download that now. The link is at the top of the description. Thanks again for joining me today, and we will see you again next time.